guys, and welcome to this second episode of my MoGraph beginners course, or should I call it series. And in today's episode we're gonna cover our first real animation, which is gonna be pretty much this thing. Let's see how far we come in this episode. So I thought of making this beginning animation with this burst. So well, in order to get started, we already learned press Ctrl N for new composition, and I would suggest 1920 by 1080 and 30 frames is cool. Duration 13 seconds, I'll let it as it is, and click on OK. So now that we've got our composition, we want to create our first shape, our first square, which we can see here, this downscaling square inside here. So in order to make this, I'm going to select this shape tool or press Q, whoops, and then I will show you a trick that really kind of nobody knows. So we want to make a square which is exactly, which has the length of exactly this composition. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna double click it, and then you can select your fill color, whatever, up here, and your stroke color, or just deactivate it here. So now that we've got this shape, go down to contents, rectangle path, and now we got this size here, which is 1920 by 1080. Which is as big as the composition, but we want it to be a square, so you have to unclick this and then copy this value and paste it in here, and now we've got a perfect square which is as big as the composition. So now there are two possibilities which you can do. The first one would be animating the scale, which you can make through pressing S, or the size. And my personal favorite, I always prefer to animate the size. This is because this value is not consistent, it's not linear. You know, when I scale it up from 0 to 50%, it's something way different as if I would scale it up from 200 to 250. So as I don't want it, I always click on this arrow, go to contents, rectangle path, size, or just type in size in here. And then this is gonna be a thing which you're gonna do very often. Click this stopwatch. And now we got our first keyframe. This is our keyframe. I'm gonna zoom in by pressing this, and yeah. Now I've got this keyframe, and as we don't want just to scale one value up and down, we're gonna want to activate this again. Okay, so you know it's gonna scale as a square. And also what we have to do first is, it may seem like the square is in the middle, but maybe it's not. Just to be sure, go to Window, select Align, and then distribute this to the very middle by pressing these two buttons. And then last thing is gonna be the anchor point. In my case it's already in the middle, but if it's not, just select this tool, pan behind, and drag it into the middle and press Ctrl, and it's gonna snap into the middle. So now I'm gonna make the size animation. So I'm gonna go down the composition a few frames by just dragging this, and then I am gonna type in, let's see, 300, and now what it's gonna do, what After Effects is gonna do, it's gonna calculate the frames in between the animation. So this is what we got now. Whoop. Looks pretty bad for now because it's a linear animation, but we're gonna change that very soon. So if I play this, you know, I have to go back all the time and play it again. So now in order to not do that, to be more practical, just go somewhere around 10 frames after the last keyframe and press N, or you can also drag this thing around, which is the border of our work area. And our work area is the area which is going to be previewed when I press space, you know, and it's going to repeat it all the time if you have selected the repetition mode in here in the preview tab, which you can also find on the window here, preview. So anyways, now we got this animation, right? In order to give this thing more life and not look pretty linear like this, you're gonna select both of these keyframes and press F9. I can show what this does in a very good example by just making a shape, pressing Q again. You don't have to follow me when I do this here. I'm just gonna try to show you what this does, pressing F9. So when I'm just gonna make 2 keyframes, position keyframes, and just don't ask what I'm doing here. Just this is just all for one point. So now you're gonna see those little dots in between. So this is our position animation. It's gonna walk from here to here, and those in between little points are our frames. And when I click on F9, then there are gonna be more dots in the beginning, fewer points in the middle, and then more in the end again, which is called easing, okay? So now we're gonna get into this in more detailed. So I've seen many motion graphic works, even from advanced freelancers, as they call themselves, who maybe have worked for around 3 or 4 years already, but they just don't use the graph editor. The graph editor is this thing right there, graph editor. Don't be shocked when I click this. This might look a bit nerdy, or I don't know, it just might look a bit complicated, but it's really not if you just get into it for a little bit. Just select those 2 keyframes, okay, which you made and already pressed F9. Then click on this thing, and then you're gonna see these 2 squarey dots. And those are our both keyframes, which you can see here in our timeline. And this line in here is our movement, is our scale. So it's the value of our size. Here it's 1920, and here it is 300. This is the graph of the value. And if I wouldn't have clicked F9, if I select those and click Alt and click those, it's gonna be linear movement. And if I press F9, it's gonna ease in. It's gonna slowly ease in and ease out. And if I drag these out more, you're gonna see the graph is gonna go like, and let's see how this movement looks like. So this is pretty much the movement which we got here. And now, as we got this cool movement, I'm gonna duplicate this layer, and I'm gonna drag this a few more frames back. And then I'm gonna change the inside color to let's see, some kind of red. Okay, and then I'm gonna select this layer and drag it down under this layer. So now we got these 2 layers melting into each other. But as we have seen here, we don't want them to actually melt into each other. We want the first one to disappear and the second one to be kind of still be there. So the first one is gonna disappear, which is this one, the yellow one. So I'm gonna type in 0. So now you're gonna see this. Yep. Which is already pretty cool animation. I mean, for a beginner. And so now in the next part, you're going to see this circle popping up from the middle. But as we can see later on, this isn't actually a circle. This is a rectangle, or actually a square, a rounded square. So what are we going to do now? We are going to create a shape. And this shape is going to be a rounded square. So you can see this rounded rectangle tool right here. Just select this, and as always, press somewhere in around the middle and press Ctrl and Shift and drag this out. Then align it to the middle by pressing this and this button. And as always, drag the anchor point with the anchor point tool into the middle until it snaps. And now we go down to our contents rectangle properties, and into the rectangle path, we're going to see our roundness. And the roundness is exactly what we want. If we drag this up to the maximum level, it's going to be a perfect circle. So this is the value which it is going to be at the very beginning. So you can drag this up however you want, but I would suggest dragging it to the least amount possible. Okay, so now we're gonna make a scale animation once again. So I'm gonna make a size keyframe, pressing the stopwatch, and then I'm gonna drag this forward because we want to scale it up, not down. And then just type in 0. We're gonna see it's gonna scale up. Now we want to ease it again, so we're gonna select those, press F9, go into the graph editor, and then mess around with it. Okay, and this is maybe a little too big for me. So I'm just gonna go to this very frame. When you can see this thing is blue, you're exactly on the frame. And gonna drag this down a little bit. Yep. Okay, cool. And the next step, which we're gonna do, is this transition right here. So this is gonna be a little more complicated, but anyways, let's get started. So from this frame on, the circle is slowly gonna start to scale up, and then finally scale up to the value of 1920, which is gonna be the whole screen. And then going on from this very keyframe right here, from this frame, we're gonna make a roundness keyframe, because you can also animate the roundness. Who would have guessed? And then when we go to this last frame, you can drag the roundness to 0. And look, now it's gonna transition from a circle into a square. And well, I'm gonna select all those keyframes again, press F9, and then I'm gonna firstly go into this size keyframe, graph editor. Want it to slowly start and then whoop, be fast in the end. So we're gonna drag this beginning thing out very much, the end a little bit. Now you can see. Yep, that's almost flawless. Okay, anyways, and this one is a bit finished too early, so I wanted to make kind of the same thing again, you know, like this. Yep, pretty cool. So you can always zoom in by just dragging your mouse wheel. So now when we go back into this animation, we can see something interesting happening here. So the circle is gonna scale up in this square, and as soon as it is out of this square, it's gonna turn into yellow. So now we're gonna get into a new chapter, which is matte. It's just called matte, like this, M-A-T-T-E. And well, I'm just gonna show you a few modes. So first things first, I am gonna take this layer, this layer actually, this square, and duplicate it. Then I'm gonna drag it to the very beginning, to the very top I mean, and then I'm also gonna duplicate this circle layer. And now what this does, I'm gonna show you, I'll just start clean and just activate those two layers. You can do it by pressing this point so that you don't have to deactivate all these layers. I'm just gonna activate those two. So I'm gonna show you the modes now. So there's one mode, alpha matte. This means that this layer, which is, no track matte, which is this circle, should only be visible in this square. So when I drag it out, we can see it's not gonna be visible as soon as it hits the outside of the square. You can see, when I deactivate this layer, you can see this is gonna happen. Whoop. So now, as we want this circle, this upscaling circle, to have another color when being outside of this square, we're gonna duplicate our circle once again and duplicate our square once again, drag it above the circle, and then press alpha inverted matte. So this is pretty much, this goes after pretty much the same principle, but it's just inverted. So it's going to be visible everywhere, but not in this area, in the square area. So yeah, I gotta have to play around with this a little. But anyways, I'm gonna select those inverted things down here. Whoops, and activate this one again. And then I'm gonna select my circle, my inverted circle, and give it another color. Let's say, what do I know? Maybe something like, no, that's pretty ugly. Just gonna say something like this. Okay, so now we're gonna see this transition. Okay, I'm just gonna check if this is the same. Yep, it is. So now in the end you will only see this square again, which is the same as in this animation. Let's preview this. Let's go to the beginning and press space. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And well, now we pretty much got this background left and everything rotating. And now we're gonna get into a new chapter once again, which is gonna be parenting. So just not to confuse you, I'm gonna start just by drawing the background actually. So now you're gonna create a square, which is pretty much like this square once again, like filling out the whole screen. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna take this one, duplicate it, press U. By pressing U, you can see all the keyframes on this layer. And if I press U again, I'm gonna hide everything. If I double press U, I'm gonna see all the properties I changed. But this is something else. So I want you to go to the very beginning, to the very first keyframe, and then delete those. Because if I would have gone into the middle, in between somewhere, and deleted them, it would have stayed at their very value at the time. So anyways, I'm gonna drag this layer down all the way because it's gonna be our background, and then it's gonna get interesting. So we want this thing, as we can see it here, whoops, we want this to fill out a quarter of our composition. So in order to do that, I'm gonna select this anchor point pan behind tool and drag it into this edge, press Ctrl until it snaps. So now that this anchor point is right here, this anchor point is gonna be the point where the position is based on. So when I go to this shape, the position is gonna be the middle of the screen, but on this shape, the position is gonna be this point. So I'm gonna just copy these position properties, values, and then we're gonna see the anchor point is in the middle of the screen. So we can duplicate this one now and click on R for rotation, or I forgot, for position you have to press P. You can click R for rotation and then just type in 180, and then we got this. And then we're going to duplicate these two by pressing Ctrl D, go to rotation again, then press this and hold Ctrl and Shift, and then you can snap it to let's see, this. Okay, 90 and 270. And then I'm gonna select another fill. Okay, now we got this cool background. Okay, now there's only the rotation things left, which we can see here. But as we can see, everything is rotating. Everything is rotating, and well, we would have to make a keyframe for the rotation here and paste it everywhere, copy and paste it. Or there's a thing called parenting. So what this does is pretty much what the name says. So I'm just gonna click Alt Control Shift Y for a null. A null is pretty much, it's not visible. It doesn't do anything, but it's just a, it's like nothing, but you can make keyframes on it. You can set keyframes and then you can parent other frames to it. So you can make other, you can parent other shapes to it, other layers. So what parenting means is that when I set a keyframe on this layer and then I want to parent this to this one, then this is gonna move with this frame. It's gonna like do the same thing, follow this layer. It's gonna follow this as a parent. So I'm just gonna show you by example, because learning of example is the easiest thing. So just go to this null object and go to somewhere around here, maybe 10 frames, and click R for rotation, make a keyframe, and then go forward to maybe 2 seconds, and then just type 180. Select those two again, press F9, and then just mess around with the graph editor again. Just drag those two out. And well, nothing happens now. We can only see that this null is just rotating this little red thing. But now we want the other shapes, other layers to rotate with it. So I'm gonna select all those 4. And what do we need? This square has to rotate with it, and this square. So with all these layers selected, I'm gonna take this parent pick whip and drag it onto this null object. Now with all these selected, I'm gonna go to the beginning of this animation, of this rotation, and then take this pick whip, which is called pick whip. It's for me it looks like a snail, and then drag it onto null object. Now we will see everything is gonna rotate with it. Okay. Okay, so I guess this is pretty much it for the second part. Don't worry, we will get to this burst and other elements like this accent and this falling ball in the next tutorial, but I hope this was helpful for you just to get started with your first keyframes, with your first animation, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.